The first slide says it is a legacy. That word always concerns me, how to define legacy. That's a tough thing. I mean, do I do it with ranch? Do we do it with conservation? Our conservation story has just started in the last 13 years. So if I go back to the ranch for just a minute, let me give you a snapshot of what our legacy looks like. Can you hear me? Sometimes I want to throw the microphone away. Now the problem we have here, folks, is that they either put me before lunch or after lunch. After lunch, at my house, my day starts about 4 o'clock. So after lunch, I like to take a nap. So we're done with the nap, all right? We're not going to sleep. We'll keep you awake. My problem is going to be, I appreciated Reed's comments this morning. Kevin, I've got talking points, and I'm going to ramble a bit, and I'm sure I'm going to go over time. So you guys may have to drag me off here, but we'll get through our story. That legacy, I'm going to give you a snapshot of what happened last week. My dad just turned 90 in March. I am very fortunate to have him and my mother still very much a part of Weininger Davis Ranch. And I was down at the other ranch this past week. I'm usually down there every day. I came in after lunch. It was about 2 o'clock, about this same time, and I walked into the house and I wanted to check on Dad. The first thing that met me was his dog. Her name is Jane. She's a good cow dog, and so wherever Jane's at, Grandpa's, that's where he's at. So I assumed he was in the house. Mom was sitting there in a chair, and she's getting hard of hearing, but both of them, their mind, eyes, just as sharp as a tack. I mean, Dad can go out in the pasture and look at cattle for me and say, Russell, we've got a problem. He doesn't move as quick as he used to when he was my age, and I don't move as quick as my son does, so we are getting there. But I said, Mom, is Dad here? She goes, Lyle, Russell's here. Nobody, he did not respond. And I said, well, Mom, is Dad asleep? Well, no, he was just here in the house. And she said, well, he was doing some stuff out in the corral this morning. Why don't you walk out there and check? So I slipped out and went out to the corral. Now, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, July, in eastern Colorado. July is not my favorite month. When it comes 2 o'clock, I usually try to find my office and a cooler and try to do some things inside in the afternoon. I am a man of few excuses, but in July I do look to do some book work in the office. I went out to the corral, and we have an intensive AI program. We run all of our cows through, so we have developed a chute system that we run the cows through and deal with out there, and there's always work to be done. And I go out, and we have built this, it's a big hydraulic chute and have a canopy over it. And my dad has a list, fellas, of work that needs to be done. I have been trying for 20 years to retire that man. Now, I might be president, and your wife, I don't know where Jim went, but your wife might, is he around the corner? There he is. My dad plays a big part in what happens at the ranch. And I'm okay with that. And so he has a list of jobs that needs to be done. I walk out the corral. There, guys, he's sitting. We've got a chair out there because it's difficult for him to stand. But he is sitting there with a paintbrush and a can of paint on the chair by the chute, painting. 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and it's 101 degrees out. He's got his hat on and his shirt. Now, let me say this. Those are the shoes I have to fill. Those are the shoes that I am going to have to walk in. Now, I am my father's son. I am not my father, but I am his son. So there are things about his life that's very much a part of my life. I said, Dad, why don't you retire? He says, why should I retire? You know what his comment is? He says, I'm already doing what I love. Why would I want to go somewhere else? And that is a work ethic, no excuses. There's not a check in the mailbox for him to pick up. I mean, things are pretty tough right now. If something needs to be done, he'll do it. He takes that responsibility. So that's the kind of legacy, folks. Those are the shoes I have to fill, and I'm not sure I can do that. It's going to be quite a task. He is a man of faith. I mean, growing up, we worked 6 days. We went to church Sunday morning. We came home Sunday afternoon, took a nap, and we were back at it Monday morning. That's how I grew up. That's how my son grew up. That's why he's now in Texas in the oil and gas industry. Talk about transferability. I transferred him all right. I mean, I am guaranteed a retirement program here. You know, what's interesting about that is that I have 3 younger brothers, and 2 of them are completely away from the ranch. And he was talking about large families. My youngest brother has 9 children, 6 boys. And those boys have grown up in the city. And so guess where they want to be through the summer months? They're tired of the city. They want to be with us. And so I've got guys standing in line that whenever Russell says it's time to come, we'll come. I'm going to move through the history and on to ranch wildlife. We have so many things going on at the ranch. Unbeknownst to me, this journey started for me in 2001. And we have it's shortgrass prairie, and the wildlife suite is just incredible. We've got the swift fox, burrowing owls, prairie dogs. Now, come on, you can laugh a little louder than that. I mean, I could say something about Nebraska, but I'm not going to do that. So, the prairie dogs, we've got a plains leopard frog, Massasauga snake. We've just got a whole suite of wildlife going on underneath, unbeknownst to Russell Davis. I had no clue as to what was going on the ranch. In 2001, I happened to be one morning working out in a pasture, working on the fence line, doing some stuff, typical kind of things on a ranch, and I noticed a vehicle about 3 miles off to the east in the middle of a prairie dog habitat, and I thought, oh, good grief. And that's not, well, I say that. Usually when I see a vehicle, I hear gunshots. And so and that doesn't bother me, but I didn't hear gunshots that day. And I thought, well, they're not fishing over there, so I had no clue as to what was going on. This went on for a couple of days, and I couldn't get away to go over and check. And so finally the 3rd day, that afternoon, I went over. And as I was driving down the true track, I noticed this was a little Toyota pickup. Well, folks, I don't know about your country, but then I'm thinking, uh-oh. This can't be good. And the closer I got, there was a young lady out in the middle of the prairie dog habitat. She had khaki shorts on, binoculars around her neck, and kind of a funny-looking fisherman's cap. And by the time I got to the pickup, I was just beside myself. I thought, what in the world is going on here? What is she? Because she had been here for 3 days. And that day, I'd seen her in the morning, and all through till the afternoon was by the time I got over there. I got out of the pickup, and the first words out of my mouth was, what are you doing here? And she was a little bit intimidated. I mean, I was not real happy, and the expression in my voice, I'm sure she realized that I was not happy. And she introduced herself. And she was with a research crew, and I said, well, I apologize. I'm Russell Davis. I said, what are you doing here? The first words out of her mouth, I mean, she didn't bat an eye, was, Mr. Davis, do you know how many mountain plovers you have on this ranch? Well, first of all, folks, the mountains are 80 miles that way, and this is flat. Second, I had no clue as to what a mountain plover was. And her comment was, they're everywhere. I still had no clue. I mean, I did not. I had no clue as to what a mountain plover was. And I said, well, what is the significance of that? And she said, and the next statement changed my life. She said, Fish and Wildlife Service is proposing to list this bird for the endangered species, as an endangered species. All right, young lady, it's time for you to get back in the vehicle and leave. Well, that was all going through. Okay, you got to understand, my family is very conservative. I have my two youngest brothers are even more conservative, more right than I am. I'm probably a little more on the mellow side and have mellowed some, although some folks will argue with you about that. But I want to keep you at my kitchen table. I want to have a second conversation. I want you to come back. And so in order for me to have these conversations, I have learned there are things that, well, you know, you can get in a pick and come with me and we can go shoot a prairie dog. That doesn't go so well. I mean, that's not something that folks just, that they relate to. So I'm pretty guarded about what I say and how I say it. She said, I'm going to give you a card of the researcher that is in the area doing the research. Farm Bureau had actually got wind that Fish and Wildlife Service was going to list the bird. And they had the foresight to put some folks on the ground in our area, actually my neighbor, and do some research. And this young lady said, there are more mountain plovers in this area than I have seen all summer anywhere else. And that just scared me to death, folks. I mean, the only way I could respond to this was, you know what? Highway 71 runs the length of the ranch. And not only can you find it, but I went out there to make sure there wasn't a sign up that said mountain plovers, welcome here. That day changed my life. I went back to the ranch, and we had just got internet capability and looked up mountain plover. And even after I looked it up, I still wasn't sure what I had or why it was in my prairie dog habitat. Why did it, Kevin, why did it choose me? Why is it here? And I know better than ask questions, you know. As a result of that, it wasn't but a week later that my neighbor called and said, Russell, we're going to have a workshop in the area, and RMBO is holding it, and we would like for you to come. Well, my immediate thought, and again, I had no clue what RMBO was, so I thought it was some rifle organization, you know, that I thought, boy, this is going to be pretty good. And so we talked about it, and I said, well, what does RMBO stand for? Well, in previous presentations, I said an IRA terrorist group, but I'm pretty careful now because I don't want you folks to think that I'm associated with any terrorist group or anything, but or RMBO is. But he says it's Rocky Mountain Bird Observatory, and I'm going, oh no. And it was going to be 2 miles away from the ranch. And he said, we would like for you to come, and they're going to talk about the mountain plover. No, not interested. My son, we homeschooled our 2 kids. My son was there. In the afternoon, usually, I started the presentation about my dad at the shoot. That's how my son is growing up. And so Kyle would look for any opportunity to get Dad out of the house and go somewhere. And he heard about this. He says, oh, Dad, we need to go. We'll get a free lunch. Yeah. 10 minutes? Really? I told you it's going to be long. I haven't even got started. All right. We got our free lunch. At that meeting, I met 2 individuals. Those 2 individuals, the one's with the mustache and another one to your right, Ken Morgan and Bill Noonan, and those guys changed my life. Ken Morgan in the middle, after the workshop that day, and by the way, I met some of you know her, Tammy Vercottern, is now in charge of Rocky Mountain Bird Observatory. Tammy was the one that just really sweet-talked me that day. I mean, she was just incredible. She said, we want to visit with you about the mountain plovers and what's going on there at the ranch. And I said, well, we'll see. Ken said, I'd like to come to the ranch and spend some time with you. He spent a week there at the ranch, and he said, Russell, you have a 5-star hotel. Well, first of all, folks, I've never been to a 5-star hotel. So that comment just went completely over my head, His point was that we had an abundance of species on the ranch. And he said, and then he made another comment. He says, we'd like to partner with you. We're looking for landowners to work with to have places that we can come and do the research. Long story short, at that time, Colorado had just put in place the Colorado Species Conservation Partnership Program. And he said, we've got money in a program. What would it take for you to work with us to allow us to come on the ranch, do the research, and continue to do the good things that you're doing? Well, first of all, I didn't know what good things I was doing. I'm serious. I still did not understand the concept of what was going on Wanneger Davis Ranch. We began a 3-year process of working through the bureaucracy of getting through this easement. He was sitting here at the kitchen table looking across from me saying, Russell, what would it take for you to do this easement with us? Well, money. Again, understand where I'm coming from. The conservation, wildlife. Here we are a working ranch. So I was, an innovative way to bring more dollars in. He said, all right, he never batted an eye. You know what he said? How much? I said, oh, come on, you're blowing smoke at me. You're not serious? He says, I'm serious. What will it take for you to partner with us? We started down this road. The bureaucracy was incredible. Let me give you 2 snapshots of what happened. Little did I know, because we're dealing with public funds, public dollars, that we had to have our county commissioners sign off on the project. My state representative and state senator had to sign off on it, and then it had to go to the Capital Development Committee. Well, and again, kind of naive to the process, I said, okay, we'll start down this road. We started with the Lincoln County Commissioners. Not much different than I am. And I was unaware of the process. Ken called me one night and says, Russell, we've got a problem. He says, have you seen your local newspaper? I said, no. He said, maybe you'd ought to pick one up. The headlines, Wanneger Davis Ranch, conservation easement, growing prairie dogs. My life changed. My life just got miserable. This community I'd grown up in. These folks knew me. They'd missed the whole point. Well, I didn't know they were meeting with the commissioners, first of all, or we had carried this. We've learned a lot about communication, folks. We had carried this conversation much different. To the credit of the newspaper lady, 3 weeks later, she published another article, the focus on the mountain plovers. At that time, they thought prairie dog habitat was critical to the mountain plover. And so we happened to get through that hurdle. I talked to my state senator. He said, Russell, you're a fool. Now, I'm serious. That's what he said. He said, you do not want to do this. I said, well, Senator, why don't you come down and see what we're doing? We had this conversation. He says, if you're going to go forward with this, he says, I'll sign off on it. But I had folks tell me that I had sold my soul to the devil. That's what I was doing. Because we were trying to do something on the ranch, put in place this easement to deal with this bird. We got her done. 3 years later, we got her done. What happened then, that here I am, a part of a small community, Carville community. We're having problems keeping our community alive. When we started this process, we had 46 kids in the school. And now we have 32 this year. So how we formed the Carville Community Alliance to figure out how we bring young people back in the community. I was sitting in a meeting of folks my age and older, and they say, how are we going to get you folks out to Carville? What's going to interest you? Well, they all knew that I was going through this process. Everybody was kind of in this standoffish mode from Russell Day. I lost all my friends. They were over here looking at me like this, until we see where we're at and what we're doing. I said, why don't we do a birders weekend? You could have heard a pin drop in that room that night. Seriously. And so one of the ladies said, well, what does that mean, Russell? And I said, well, we could, I don't know. We don't have hotels. We don't have a convenience store. I said, well, we're going to have to put folks up in our home. We're going to have to provide the meals. Let's bring folks in and show them the bird and charge them. Nobody said a word. I mean, you would have thought that I just signed my death warrant right there with those folks, my neighbors. And I've got a neighbor, Carl Stogstall, which is he's a good friend, and he says, Russell, and he cussed, it sounds to me like it's a pretty good idea. Any of the rest of you folks have any better ideas? He got real silent again. And the ladies then started talking among themselves about, well, we could do this. If we had this meal, this group could do this meal. Friday night, we can do this Saturday morning, Saturday night. We're in our 6th year of Mountain Plover Festival in Carville, Colorado. I have a young man sitting over here at the end of the table. Seth Gallagher is with Rocky Mountain Bird Observatory. I can't do 2 things at once, so he's clicking for me. He's been instrumental in what's going on there at the ranch and the community. He is my main bird guide. The first year down there in 2007 when we started the festival, I think we had 64 birds, you counted. And I'm done. And I'm done. And this year we had 96, almost broke 100. And so it's just been incredible. Some neat things have happened. We've moved from the festival. Let's go to the RAW program, because I've talked to several of you about this. I had a young lady then in 2009 that came to me in our FFA chapter out of the school at Carville. And she said, Mr. Davis, she lived in Carville. She didn't have room for livestock. She didn't have a project. She said, I'd like to do something with wildlife education. I said, yes. One of the things I had learned in this whole process, we started bringing groups to the ranch for tours, to outreach, to educate them as to what was going on the ground at the ranch. She said, I'd like to reach out to our inner city kids and bring them to the ranch and teach them about what's going on here. We began that process. We've done this now for 3 years. Springs, we've had 5 different schools come out the ranch for the day. We split it up into 5 sections just very quickly. 2 on livestock, 45 minutes each. 3 on habitat with the shortgrass prairie species. And we rotate those kids. We divide them up into 5 groups and rotate them through that program every 45 minutes into a next section. Our high school kids lead the sections. They talk to those kids, our FFA kids and our science kids. And they reach out to them and tell them what's going on at Wanacre Davis Ranch. As a result of that, working through that, the kids at the high school, our FFA advisor, and our science, and quite a collaboration process, developed a curriculum book for that program, and also a disc. Very simple, very easy. We want to put this in the hands of parents that have their kids in those rural schools. You can do this same kind of program. All you need is a willing FFA chapter, a landowner that will host, and move it forward. And so the RAW program, Ranch and Wildlife Youth Program, came about as that. The other thing that had happened that's really been neat for me, and this will come as no surprise to you folks, and then I'll bring this all to an end. I am tired of the environmentalists telling me what to do. I've really struggled with that for a long time, and I thought, how are we going to go down this road? Well, guess what? One night, the middle of the night, the light came on. landowners, you folks, we need to lead the charge in this. We need to carry the conversation. We need to communicate as to what's going on at a landscape level in our own backyards. In '08, they carted me off to Montana to the Blackfoot Challenge. I spent a week out there with some landowners and agency people. Kenny Dinan is here. Most of you folks in Nebraska probably know him. I met Kenny there, and that week changed my life. I came home from that week, and I told folks it's like I've been to church camp. Seriously. I mean, I was so fired up. I didn't know there were people in other parts of the U.S. doing the same thing that we were doing. I mean, we were pretty isolated. And so as a result of that meeting, we formed a national group, Partners for Conservation, for the men there, and have propelled ourselves out to reach out to other landowners, a landowner-led movement, and carry this conversation and deal with these issues, whether it's endangered species or Farm Bill, which we are currently working on. We just hired an executive director, which we have been trying to do for 3 years now, and I couldn't get any money out of anybody to do this. And finally, National Wildlife Refuge Association stepped up last year and said, we'll fund a position. Steve Jester, sitting back in the back, Steve, if you would stand, is now a full-time employee of our fledgling National Group Partners for Conservation. And so we're excited. Our Vice President, Jim Falstich, many of you know from South Dakota, is here. But we are trying to lead in this conversation and move this organization forward. And we've made several trips to D.C. already and working at a local level. A lot of good things. All right, I'm done. I'm a blessed man. I don't know that I'll be able to fill the shoes that my dad has, but I'll work it hard at being who I am and doing the very best I can and doing what's best not only for the livestock operation but also for wildlife conservation and go down this road. So many details I left out. I'm sorry, I apologize. There's a lot more to the story. A lot of good things have come from it. So if you'd like to visit later or ask questions, please do that. But you all stayed awake pretty well, so thank you.